Hi, everyone. Welcome to Leisrealtalk. Happy Friday, happy Saturday. I normally don't do live streams Friday evenings, but I want to do a program on the flood. It's affecting so many people's lives, and I cannot let it go without talking about it. Um, so Typhoon Doksuri, I think if I hope I'm pronouncing it right, because the Chinese have a different name for it, but I think the official English name is Doksuri. It's very odd. After developing strength in the Pacific, it moved towards Taiwan and China. It mysteriously made some 90-degree turns and passed Taiwan without much harm and landed in Fujian, causing flood. And the flooding in Fujian affected 1 million people. That's according to the official Chinese numbers. So here I have a picture from Fujian. That's quite a scene. So this is Fujian, and then it went north straight to Beijing. I have a picture. Do I have a picture in Beijing? Yeah. I was shocked to see this picture. I find it hard to believe that this was from Beijing, but everywhere I looked, it seems to tell me that this picture was from Beijing. But anyways, it was the most hard-hit areas in Beijing is Fangshan district and Mentougou. Online videos show that an entire delivery center was swept away, including trucks that are 2 meters tall. And raging floodwaters rushed past one of Beijing's most luxurious hotels, the Xitang Hotel, and it destroyed the lobby and also the outside landscape. The hotel guests complained about the hotel not having water, not having electricity, and the roads outside the hotel were destroyed. By the way, the hotel opened for business last April, and the price tag is $900 to $2,000 per day. I'm not talking about yuan, I'm talking about dollars. And so that's what happened in Beijing. The heavy rain started in Beijing on July 29th. But the interesting thing is the worst hit areas are not in Beijing. It's in Hebei province. So near Beijing, at least 20 large and medium-sized dams have been discharging water to nearby areas. And these places have become what I call flood relief areas for Beijing. And Hebei's Zhengzhou is the worst hit flood area. And it's at the center of an unnatural disaster. It's what I called a man-made calamity. Let me show you a map. Do I have a map? I do have a map. Here we go. So here's the Zhengzhou is in the middle on the left, and you have Beijing to the north. So Zhengzhou is in between Beijing and Xiong'An. Xiong'an is China's new capital. And there's the Daxing Airport, international airport, near Beijing. So, by the way, Zhengzhou is about 35 miles to the southwest of Beijing and about 40 miles north of Xiong'an. So in order to protect Beijing and the new capital city, Xiong'an, and also the Daxing International Airport, authorities have decided to sacrifice Zhengzhou. The city has about 650,000 population, and it has 6 rivers. Hold on, I'll show you. It has 6 rivers or waterways that runs to it. So because of the 6 rivers, Beijing can quickly discharge dam water to Zhengzhou via these waterways. But here's one problem. The city's elevation is higher than Xiong'an, Let me show you a chart. So here's someone posted this online. So they searched on Baidu, which is the Chinese equivalent of Google. They searched the sea elevation of each city, and you see how Xiong'An is 7 to 19 meters above sea level, whereas Zhengzhou is higher. It's 20 to 70 meters higher. So you've got a problem. That is, if the authorities just discharge water from Beijing to Zhengzhou, the flood will continue downstream and go all the way to Xiong'An, which is Xi Jinping's baby project, right? It's the new capital city, or the second capital city. I shouldn't say new, because Beijing is still around. It's just the second capital city he built. So you have this problem. So what do? Well, they have to find ways to hold the water in Zhengzhou so the flood does not go down to Xiong'An. By the way, when Xi Jinping built Xiong'An, many experts were against the idea to develop a capital city in that area. The reasoning is that Xiong'An's elevation is too low, and the city will be subject to severe flooding. However, China's fearless leader didn't listen and went ahead with the construction of the project. And now, what experts feared is becoming a reality, a terrible reality. So the authorities would do anything to stop water from running down to their precious new capital. By controlling, how do they do it? Well, by controlling the vast system of dams on the waterways. Through discharging water and flooding certain targeted areas, the CCP can divert the flood and prevent it from flooding Xiong'An. And this was catastrophic for Zhengzhou, as it was turned into a dam for Beijing and Xiong'An. Now, let me talk a little bit about the timing, because it shows you how dysfunctional the Chinese government, Chinese authorities, or the regime has become. It's totally incapable of dealing with a crisis, a natural disaster like that, or to deal with disaster relief efforts. So 2 days after Beijing and nearby areas were hit with heavy rain and flooding, in the afternoon of July 31st, people in Zhengzhou started to see water level rise quickly. That morning, some residents got notices from their neighborhood community offices about severe flood would take place that evening. But the notice didn't mention how bad it would be, or what people would do or what people should do to protect themselves. The city government sent a formal notice at 9:30 that evening, advising residents not to get close to waterways due to heavy rain and upstream dam discharges. So it did mention the dam discharges, but all it said is ask people not to get to the dangerous water areas. But the city was flooded, so what do you mean by not get close to the waterways, right? And 20 minutes later, the city government issued another warning, telling people to take the notice seriously. By then, the water has already risen very high. By the time the water has risen 2 meters, people realized that it was serious. And then they started to post information and pictures online and asking for help. But for some people in the village, in the rural areas, they didn't have as much time. Some said they only have 1 hour, between the time they got the notice until the water came, they only got 1 hour. And in the villages, people live in lower level structures, one story or 2 stories high. So the next day, on August 1st, Zhengzhou's unprecedented flooding became top trending news in China, and the water level continued to rise. Let me play a video to show you how the water is discharged. Because there's still, now this has become international news. Some Chinese media are arguing that, it's just not dam water discharge, and they say, oh, this is just a heavy rain. But I want to play this video to show you why it is, what it looks like when the dam discharge water. So hopefully I'm going to find this video I uploaded. Where did it go? All right, hold on one second. I uploaded 3 videos. I'm going to play, stay until the end. I have some very unforgettable videos to play. All right, so let me play this. What you're seeing is the water coming down, like in the merging the fog. I mean, when I first saw it, I didn't know what it is. And it is water. Okay. So that's one video. So then on August 1st, the day after the flooding became trending news in China, the Minister of Water Resources, Li Guoying, said that the focus of the flood control effort is on protecting 3 areas: Beijing, Xiong'An, and Daxing Airport, Daxing International Airport. And the party secretary of Hebei province, Ni Yuefeng, he echoed the message from Beijing and said that he said this while inspecting the disaster area. He said that his province is determined to play the role of a guardian river or a moat, to play that role well, to reduce the pressure on Beijing's flood control. So these official news reports confirmed that the authorities were sacrificing parts of Hebei to help Beijing, Xiong'an, and the Daxing International Airport. But the party secretary's speech caused public anger. People in Hebei asked if their life is worth less than those in Beijing. And then later, the party secretary's speech, here you go, was either removed or become hidden. Basically, it's just not, when you search this hashtag, it's just not showing. And then here's the party secretary inspecting the relief area. In this picture, people notice that the party secretary and his officials didn't wear any rain gears while inspecting the floods. Instead, they all wore dress shoes, right? So people question if their so-called inspection was for real or for photo opportunities, right? By the way, people compared the same, I think, a similar situation in Taiwan. I think it was a flooding in 2018, where the Taiwanese president Tsai Ing-wen wore rain boots and went down to the area that was hard hit. And also they showed pictures of former Taiwanese President Ma Ying-jeou standing in the rain to talk to the victims. I mean, those just said such a drastic, difference from the CCP. I mean, they're heads of state, right? I mean, they're the president of Taiwan, whereas these guys are just provincial leaders. And look at them. I mean, they wear the same T-shirt. They had the time to coordinate their T-shirts, but they weren't even serious about, really talking to the flood victims. But anyways, Then what happened is that evening, right? So this happened on August 1st. That evening, the residents of a nearby city, Baigou, received a notice to evacuate. And having learned from the experience of Zhengzhou's residents, these residents rushed to leave the city, but they were stuck at the highway entrance, and some waited 4 hours. The reason? Well, over tens of thousands, if not more. I don't know how many, but I saw the pictures. The cars were backed up for um, kilometers long, and these people had to pay toll one by one when they entered the highway. So people complained. And then the officials applied that they didn't receive instructions from higher authorities to let people and to let people enter the highway for free, or there's no more toll charge. Just because they didn't receive instructions from higher authorities, they were still collecting tolls from people while the traffic backed up so terribly. I mean, people were running against time because time was of essence in that situation, as people wanted to leave before the water, gushing down on them, right? So during that time, the entire time, government or military rescue effort was minimal. Most of the rescue efforts were volunteers from private rescue teams, but things weren't easy for them. According to an article published in Southern Weekend on August 1, Southern Weekend, I think, is a paper, and maybe it's a weekly publication in Guangzhou. I tend to think it's probably in Guangzhou or Shenzhen, but it's definitely in the Guangdong province. So according to that media outlet, the private rescue teams got stuck on paperwork because, according to the rules, out-of-province rescue teams must have an invitation letter from the local authority, and it must be approved by the local emergency management bureau. And they couldn't go if they weren't approved. So 2 rescue teams from Shanxi were politely turned down. One rescue team from Shandong was only 6 hours away, but had to wait for approval before they could go. Later, I think I heard that some officials acknowledged that they couldn't approve because the office was flooded. They couldn't find the official seal. And then one Jiangsu rescue team applied for an invitation in the morning of August 1st and got approved around 11 o'clock that morning. But they couldn't get the paperwork until a few hours later because the communication system were broken down. Now, all of that happened while people desperately needed help, right? They need water, food, and also, being transported to somewhere higher, or somewhere safe. Let me play a video of what it looks like in Zhengzhou, and that video prompted me to do this live stream. And here we go. Where is that? Oh, here we go. Oh, by the way, the noise, the sound that you hear in the background are people screaming for help. Let me start from the beginning again.
看，好多人求救呢。有救援的赶紧来吧。这是那个新华地市场，看看，好多人都没出来呢。
这水深能达到7、8米、8、9米，最深的地方12米。现在去营救下一波这个被困人员。
Okay. So you have meter that's you have water that's 12-meter deep. I don't know how many floors. That's easily 5 floors, right? If 2 meters, yeah, 2.5 meters a floor. 1 story, 2.5, 2.5. So you have 5. So water could be, at least is the deepest is 5 stories tall. And that video is recorded by one of the rescue teams. Now, after a few days, 70% of the rescue teams decided to quit because they aren't being welcomed by the local government. And the lack of support from the local officials make their rescue effort more dangerous. It's been 4 days, right? And they say that dead bodies of animals and humans may cause diseases to spread. And but the rescuers cannot say this because they do rescue. They are volunteers. They're not paid. These are just private citizens who are trained in this kind of rescue. So they use their equipment, their supplies. They're doing this on their dime to come help the flood victims. But the local government have made it difficult for them. And it's getting dangerous. I mean, these are not like these tasks are highly dangerous. So one rescue team issued a statement saying that they're leaving because there is an oversupply of rescue resources and they're no longer needed. I do have a picture of that. Here you go. So you have this statement. If you read it, it's so ironic. So why do the officials make things so difficult for these volunteers? I mean, these are the questions we always, we don't understand the CCP logic, right? Why do they make it difficult? I mean, these people are helping the government do their job. Why? Well, because the government doesn't want these private citizens to be involved, as it fears that they would disclose the terrifying situation in the disaster areas via social media. They want to lock down the area to prevent information from spreading, as they feared such a dire situation will cause public outcry and social instability. Because the regime's reputation and stability are far more important than people's life. Right? It's the same as how the regime covered up the pandemic in 2020 and how it covered up the great flood of Zhengzhou in 2021. I think more and more Chinese have awakened to this, and the world sees it clearly now. On August 3rd, and the worst isn't over yet. On August the 3rd, the CCTV news acknowledged that Hebei, Zhengzhou, the city, is a flood-hit area. The deputy director of the Provincial Water Resource Department, Li Na, said that it would take some time for the water level to recede, and it may take 1 month. And according to the same CCTV news report, there's a yet 300 million to 400 million cubic meters of water to pass through Zhengzhou at a later stage. That means the authorities haven't finished discharging water to the poor city, and its water level may continue to rise. Now, as people move up to higher floors in their buildings, they wonder if high-rise residential buildings will withstand the water for such a long time. One online video showed that in one community, do I have a picture? Oh, here, yeah, here. There's an online video that shows this water continue to pour into this hole on the ground. Because the underground structure of this high-rise residential building had collapsed, and so causing water to gush into the ground. And the video showed that the hole enlarged, and people in the community just worried about the safety of the building. And And others have posted online about hearing cracking noises in their buildings and bubbles coming out of the water from, near their building. So this is an issue that worries people. And the worst hit areas are the villages where people live in ground level structures or two-story structures. And we've heard that one village that has 5,000 people have been trapped for days, and there are dozens of such villages. Now, people living in high-rise buildings aren't safe. One is because they don't know if their building will stand in the water for 1 month, given China's notorious tofu drag quality buildings. And the other thing that's threatening their life is the lack of water and lack of food, and also lack of electricity. Let me come back. And I've seen so many videos posted online with people pleading help because they have no food, no water. Some people are stranded at work, and they don't have any food with them. And so if they're not rescued, and they have been hungry for days, so there are all sorts of situations where people are trapped. And even for the people who are at home in those high-rise residential buildings, they will eventually, I think they will soon lose their cell phone signals or power because there's no electricity. So we won't know what will happen to them in those buildings, right? Because people don't have landlines anymore. So if their cell phones lose power, then we don't know what will happen to them. Someone posted a surreal picture, and I want to share this with you. And the caption reads, this picture reminds me of classic Chinese painting. And the caption says, "The flood has taken over. All is quiet. No rescue effort. No one cares. No officials are in sight. People can't get in touch with loved ones. Phones are disconnected. The almighty party suddenly disappeared." Yeah, that post is very powerful with that picture. Now, Wang Weiluo, a Chinese water conservancy expert now living in Germany, suspects that some other cities, such as Baoding, Shijiazhuang, or Xingtai, may have worse flooding than Zhengzhou. And we just didn't hear from them, probably due to blocked internet. We know about Zhengzhou because its flooding was the first that became internet sensation, and it was because people uploaded to internet very quickly after it happened. The other areas could be worse, but we don't hear about them. Not because there's no situation there or there's no flooding there. It's probably because the internet there has been blocked. Now, Wang said that the biggest problem is that this flooding problem, he said, is attributable to Beijing's having built an extensive artificial river systems in the entire Huai River basin. CCP wants to control the water, how the water flows, so it can direct the water. It can direct the direction, so the CCP can direct how the water flows. And he said that the water control system of Beijing is designed to make the water listen to its order. But we know its order isn't based on people's safety or what's good for the environment, but how the regime can gain politically or economically, because those dams are economic projects. They are used for power generation, and some dams are rented out as fishing farms. By the way, Beijing is one of China's green sponge city, which is a concept of what do you call that? It's a concept the Chinese developed as as part of its low carbon smart city initiatives. And Taiwan has used some of that ideas. Let me show you. There are 16 cities. Here's the illustration of the sponge city. There's 16 cities in China that have been selected as a pilot cities, and Beijing is one of them. And its goal, this was an idea proposed by Xi Jinping in 2013. And he proposed building sponge cities that naturally accumulates, absorbs, and purifies water. I mean, it sounds great, but in actuality, we haven't seen it happen, because we know 2 cities that are sponge cities have suffered terribly in flooding. One is Beijing in 2023, and the other is Zhengzhou in 2021. But the idea is that the idea of sponge city is, here's the original text, is that in normal circumstances, only 20% of the city's rainfall enters the ground or is evaporated. 80% of the rainfall needs to be drained away. And the so-called sponge city aims to have 60% of the rainfall be absorbed underground, like a sponge, and only 40% is discharged. That's the whole idea. So it looks very good in theory, but in actuality, according to Wang Weiluo, the water conservancy expert, he said that the theory behind this sponge city is a proposition that has not been proven successful. And yet the CCP has spent hundreds of billions of yuan to experiment it at the cost of countless human lives. Its goal, of course, is the same as its water dam projects, which is to control rivers, lakes, and rainfall. The whole idea is to control Mother Nature. I want to end my program by playing a video. The video shows us how ordinary people, their experience in this what I call unnatural disaster. And the very last 30 seconds of that, the video is very short. It's about no more than 2 minutes. It first showed how a couple escaped from their car, how they escaped from their car, and the second the second video had a lasting impact on me. But let me play that video. The music. The music was added by some Chinese netizens.
你往回走就行了，往回走。
The person filming this tell the woman to go backwards, to go to the back of the car, because if she climbs to the front of the car may tip, and they will both. So they tell the woman to, because the guy is standing in the front, they tell the woman to go to the back of the car.
没事，别着急，别着急，没事。哎呀，这个大哥呀，黄了个大高帽子，一直在张望看他的车呀，他的车早就沉了底儿了。
The voiceover said that the woman, the guy, kept looking at his car, and the car has already sank in the water. So shortly after they left the car just disappeared. Look, there's nothing, there's nothing floating on the water. So the car has disappeared.
早就沉了顶了，摸着顶早就下去了，那车。这个给人交警说让他把那车拽出来，人家怎么给他拽呀？没法拽，人说这属车了以后 才能拖车呢。这小子不放心，看上那车来了，那车里边肯定有东西啊，一劲儿往水里边看看有没有飘出来的东西。
This image had a big impact on me. This couple holding an umbrella in this water, it had a lasting impact on me. Because I was thinking the chances for them to survive is probably not very high, because if it's normal rain, then they could survive because the water level would go up very slowly. But since the water is discharged from dams and the water rose very quickly, so I think the chances for them to survive is not very high. But that video had a lasting impact on me. All right, that's all for my part, my presentation part. Let me see if people have any questions. All right. From Mitsu, how much do you think the typhoon damage in Fujian has delayed the attack on Taiwan? That's a good question. I think that question is on the mind of a lot of people. That's a good question. We should assess that. But at this point, I think the attention is rather on Beijing. By the way, the typhoon has moved up northeast to like Heilongjiang, the northeast part of China, which is an agriculture area, right? I really worry that famine will be an issue because of these natural disasters and unnatural disasters. I really worry that food production or agricultural production will be hurt this year, and then food shortage will be a problem in China. Does China have the equivalent of FEMA or Red Cross? China's Red Cross asked for donation online, and people resented it because China's Red Cross does not have a good reputation of taking the donated resources to help people in need. So Chinese people, there are local people begging people not to donate to these official organizations, and just because resources are piled up and these people don't do anything. I mean, you have to, unless you have the heart that you really want to help people, it's difficult to do the rescue work in that kind of situation, right? Because the water, you don't know what your boat is going to run into, because there are all kinds of dangerous structures or materials in the water. They're not like normal water. And so it's highly risky, unless you really have the heart that you want to help people. So I don't know how many, so Chinese people are boycotting the government's call for donation. They're saying that it's your job. You're not doing your job to rescue us, and now you're asking the public to donate money to you. Then what are you doing? What have you done? The government has not done anything. And where's the military? Where's the PLA that's supposed to help people? So, people are asking those questions. From Jeff Ramos, I lived through a Category 5 hurricane. When it rains, everyone suffers. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas Lewis. Thank you. All right. I have a question I'm just picking random questions. From Max Schroeder. How does the rest of China perceive Cantonese and Hokkien Chinese? 客家人, is that what you mean? How different are they? They're often seen as outsiders. I think for the most part of Chinese, 客家人, I think it's more recognized outside China. You see their organizations here. They are identified as separate from Cantonese. But for people from mainland China, I don't know if they really, maybe a lot of them don't really differentiate them. I mean, they're from Guangdong. If they're from Guangdong, then they're Cantonese. I can't really answer that question because I haven't been in China for a while. So other people who are familiar with China can help me answer that question. From Michael, does the USA have typhoon steering tech? I don't know. I don't know. Do you think this come from the US? I don't know. From Bob M. Thank you for your video. In your opinion, how much suffering can the Chinese people take before they have enough? Could there ever be a China Spring like the Arab Spring? I think Chinese people have already had enough. Of course, it varies from person to person and people to people, right? Groups of people. I think after this flooding, I think a lot of people will say enough is enough. Because, I mean, people have family members living in this city. It's a city that has a population of 650,000, but it's not the only city that's flooded. There are other cities that are flooded. And, so, yeah. So I don't think people can take this for very long. And the same thing is happening in Northeast. Yeah, and you can watch my video from 2 years ago on the Zhengzhou flood. It was heart-wrenching. But I'm going to ask my editor to post the link from the Zhengzhou is also a sponge city, but it flooded terribly. It's a very similar situation. All right, from B.A. Lei, thank you for taking the time to make a video on this. I saw a video of a barrier being erected to block a view of a collapsed structure. Yes, that's in Beijing, because in Beijing, the flooding in certain areas was very bad in Fangshan and also Mentogou area on the outskirts of Beijing were terrible. It was a bridge collapsed and people died. I mean, you see cars floating like paper box, cars, float in water like paper boxes. So people died. After the water receded, one eyewitness saw like 200 dead bodies. But the government, I think that they boarded up the collapsed bridge to prevent people from taking pictures of the bridge and uploading that to the internet. So yeah, it's you can tell what the regime is fearful of. From IDK0, China has zero irrigation. What can they do to establish this? The government doesn't want to do anything. Well, I think because the CCP's because of the communist ideology, which is they want to humanly intervene in Mother Nature. They want to control the weather. They want to control how water and lake flows. I mean, they want to just control the river systems. And so it has built these massive number of dams along these rivers. And so they see these dams as like water switches for them to turn on and turn off to control how the water flows. But then you still need humans to control these water switches, these dams, right? But how do they turn on and turn off these dams is not based on what will maximize the public safety, but it will be how it will maximize the interest of the leaders. So it's dangerous. It's much more dangerous than the natural disasters. Jeff Ramos, record drought last summer, COVID on January 2023, and now this typhoon tells me about 1, 2, 3 punches. You're right. It's definitely 1, 2, 3 punches, but is that enough to take down the regime? Do we need a fourth, fifth? I think it depends. The outside world. I really think the outside world should recognize the suffering that the Chinese people endures and do something. Why do the heads of states still think that they can coexist with this terrible regime? It just creates so much human misery. I just don't understand why the Biden administration and some of the European leaders think that they can coexist with this dreadful regime. Are they total? That's what I said. The Western politicians make a big mistake by removing the Chinese people from the equation of the Sino-US relations. They think Sino-US relations is the relation with the few leaders in Zhongnanhai. But Sino-US relations is the relations between two people, the Chinese people and the American people. It's not, but the few people in Zhongnanhai do not represent the Chinese people. So how can you base your relations on the opinions of those few individuals, or one individual in this case, right? So the Western governments must include the Chinese people, what they want in the dialogue, in the discussion with, because if you only do things that please the Chinese government, you are alienating the Chinese people. You're not going anywhere. So I think that's a ignorance on the part of Western politicians. And of course, Western politicians also need to represent their people. They need to do things that serve their people, not their own political interest, right? So they need to listen to not only their own people, but also people of China. That's my opinion. All right, so let's see. RC Roscoe, it's the Chinese people who need to stand up and take back the country. They are, but they also, they also need the support from at least they need supporting voice from the outside world. When people talk about China's human rights, okay, the number one issue that the West brought up is the Uyghurs, right? They don't often talk about this massive human rights violation in situations like this, like the flood. It's not an issue of bad disaster relief effort. It's lack of respect for human rights. It's also human rights. So we shouldn't think China's human rights issue is just a matter of boycotting cotton from Xinjiang or calling to release the Uyghurs detained in the labor camps. It's all Chinese people, while we're not talking about the disgruntled workers throughout China, the young people who are subject of organ harvesting in China. There's so many other, people who are being persecuted in China. Why are we not including all of them? So I think the Western nations' stand on supporting China's human rights is very weak. And sometimes it only serves, when they bring up China's human rights issues, it only serves as a political a platform for themselves so that they appear that they defended China's human rights, when in fact they could do more. They could do much, much more. That's how I feel. They have not done enough. Okay. All right, let's see. Sumiland, there's no way to talk to the Chinese people. Yes, we do care, but the CCP won't let us talk to the Chinese people. Well, you can I'm not saying that we should I mean, I think the US government can do a better job in defending the Americans that the Chinese have arbitrarily detained. Okay. If the US government don't stand up for its own citizens who are arbitrarily detained in China, how are they going to defend the Chinese people? So first of all, I'm asking the US government to defend all the the Americans that are detained in China. And the CCP is a paper tiger. You just have to, so, we released the daughter of the founder of Huawei, and yet we have Americans being detained, arbitrarily detained in Chinese prisons for not doing anything wrong. I think it shows, it's a sign of weakness in the eyes of the CCP leader. They see that immediately. Your citizens, the American public, may not have an issue about this because they are not aware how many Americans or which American citizen is being detained in China. Only that person's family and friends are aware, right? The public won't recognize that as a big issue during the election. It's not something that they talk about during the election, but the CCP sees that as a sign of weakness. They know that very clearly. When you don't defend for your own citizens, they know that they know how weak you are, and then they know what to do with you. So unfortunately, you're giving away your cards to your opponent, and the CCP is very good at of knowing what your weaknesses are and then using that against you. So, and that's often how we lose. All right. When the CCP collapses, what will happen to North Korea? I think it may declare the end of communists. Maybe the guy there would just say, hell with communism, we'll become a republic. We'll start an election. But I want to be elected. Who knows? I think if China collapses, it will have a big impact on North Korea. Max Schroeder, earthquakes happened in Turkey when I don't know how to pronounce his name, got power in winter 2023. Same natural events are happening with Xi. Are they twins in some mystic way? I think, I don't know if they're related, but I think there are so many natural disasters in China. Traditionally, we believe that it's a sign. When the Forbidden Palace is flooded, it has not been flooded for 600 years because the Forbidden City is very well designed, and the water, it has a very elaborate water drainage system. 600 years ago, the architect from the Ming Dynasty designed it. So it had never flooded until now. It flooded twice. People say that's a bad omen. That's a bad sign. That means it's traditionally, or if according to feng shui, that could mean the dynasty, the communist dynasty. It's a sign for its end. When the royal palace or when a symbol of power is flooded like that. All right. I don't think somebody said, I don't think China will ever collapse. Even a small country like North Korea is still going, even with all the sanctions. Well, China is too big and important and too powerful. Well, I agree. China as a country will not collapse. You're right. The country will not collapse, but the regime will. And that's natural, right? Government or political regimes come and go, dynasty changes, but the country stays, in place. Mark Pollard, do you see parallels between the fall of the Soviet Union and what's happening in China? I do. I do. I think Gorbachev. I mean, the economic economic disasters, and also coupled with the lack of faith in their political system, and also the leader's decision. I think it's very important. Gorbachev made a wise decision because he saw no hope. He tried very hard in his early years trying to resuscitate the regime, but his effort was fruitless, so he gave up. I think he realized that he couldn't continue anymore. He gave up. I think, how much longer would it take Xi Jinping to realize that? I hope the guy realized that soon. to save people from more miseries. All right. Okay, so I have talked a lot, and it's Friday night. I thank you for joining me, and I will see you probably Sunday morning for another subject. And so till then, okay, enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.